Ma'am, you are an expert of cyber law. Has your expertise and awareness on the field of cyber law changed your way of using or consuming social media? And what advice, caution would you give to users, especially youngsters, on the usage and consumption of social media? Knowing so much about cyber law, has it changed the way you look at social media now?
So one question you asked me earlier, which I didn't address, I'd like to add that along with this, which is there anything special that people should know if they choose cyber law?
How can a student map their way towards cyber law?
Exactly. So on that note, it is not just about cyber law. Whichever field of specialization you choose, you have to know the domain. So when I say expert in cyber law, it can't be just that I know the laws that pertain to cyber. You must also understand the technology, because only when you map technology with the law and explain how both work together, it comes out at a completely different level. Your ability to present a case will be at a much higher level than when you just know one domain or the other. So I call it bridging the gap between technology and law. So that is the criticality if you want to be a specialist. So whenever you choose a specialization, don't just focus on the law. That is important and you must know the law inside out, but also focus on the domain and learn that domain and how it functions, what are the criticalities. A simple example from very early days in terms of intellectual property rights. Often people used to miss out on where and to what extent software can be common, because the language is common, right? We are communicating in English, so English is common. But what I write using English is my copyright, right? That's the distinction. It's the same with software. And many times vendors used to miss out on their right to what they are developing and which they can reuse. Just knowing the domain and explaining to them in terms of how they should negotiate contracts brought about a huge difference for them. So that's the advantage that domain expertise brings to you. And the question about social media, I am a digital immigrant, as Prensky puts it, right? Unlike you all who are digital natives. So I must confess here that personally I was very reluctant to use social media. This is also a mindset.
Even being an expert in the field.
Exactly. More so because of that maybe. This is actually ties in with the problem that I had earlier, where I used to think that invisibility was a virtue. So I actually thought being low key, keeping a low profile, invisibility was a virtue. And we come from a very traditional form of practice of law, early days, where we would never talk about what we are doing, right? And hype was never part of our vocabulary at that time. So social media in a way felt like it was hype. And I actually eschewed social media. I'm very ashamed to confess that all my social media handles were first set up by my husband. I didn't do it also. And it took me a long time to even start posting there. And only when I finally was convinced that it is not about hype, it's about sharing knowledge. That's when I started using social media most effectively. So if you ask me, should people be in social media? I think, as I said recently in an interview, the genie is out of the bottle. You cannot stop people from being on social media. Is it good? It is great. Because look at the way communication has developed, right? We could not imagine going and publishing constantly on newspapers, our views, our thoughts, etc. At best, in our time, it was letters to the editor. And you don't know which ones will be chosen from that. I'm not talking about topic-based articles, etc. But I'm talking about general views and opinions, right? Even if it is a counter to what somebody else has written. Social media gave you that freedom of speech and expression in a real way, which no other medium could do. I would say internet, and as a platform, social media or microblogging sites, etc. Anything to do with the internet, that's where you got your freedom really. Okay? The cautionary tale there, as you asked me, be careful what you post. Remember, there are fine lines, and sometimes you yourself may not know when you're crossing the line between a joke and a crime, a prank and a crime, or something that's inappropriate and a crime. Okay? So I tell people this, and sometimes they don't like hearing this because they feel that their freedoms are restricted when I tell them to do this. But this is just the most sensible advice I can share. What you will not do in person, don't do on social media. If there is something nasty you want to say and you will feel ashamed to say it in front of somebody's face, don't post it online. Because your instinct is right. It is nasty, it is inappropriate, don't post. Similarly, if there is something I would want to share and I would not feel comfortable sharing in person, I wouldn't do it online. So exercise the same level of caution. Why I said some people feel it restrains their freedom is particularly for women. They felt that the online platform gave us more freedom. We could go where we haven't been before. Whereas I keep cautioning, saying the same dark alleys you have in the physical world exists in the online world too. So please be cautious, because ultimately prevention or protection starts with us. But if you do dare and move forward, then go with confidence but with eyes wide open. Know what the pitfalls will be and be ready to face it confidently. Don't then pull back saying, I will do whatever I want, but why are you violating my space? Because understand, there will be offenders, there will be violators. I'm not saying that's right. It is completely wrong, but you must have the courage to then stand up and initiate law. Take the legal process, make sure that they have brought a book, because that's how then examples are set. That will then become the deterrence.
So now speaking about knowledge and rights, so about this only, is it important for us to include this in the pedagogy, school pedagogy for students?
Absolutely. See, you don't have to introduce law as a subject in school level, but awareness about cyber, the field of cyber, awareness about what are the threats and vulnerabilities, awareness about how do you protect yourself. That's critical. I'm so glad that you have showcased my books here. I just want to draw attention to the more recent one here. The C there is silent because CS was for Cyber Sati. Yeah, exactly. You got the
C and the S.
Yes, correct. And Sassy Tales was meant to explain to each one of you, the Gen Z, that you are bold. You can be insouciant. You can be you can experiment. You can be adventurous. But what do you have to know when you go out on an adventure? If I go trekking, I don't just go without cautions or precautions, right? I would take certain precautions. So similarly, what are the precautions you have to take if you're going to venture into the field of cyber? And the whole idea of this book was, and I, as a rebel child, probably in my younger days, I understood that I don't like to be preached to. If somebody tells me don't touch fire, it will burn, the first thing we want to do is touch it to see whether it really burns, right? So the approach in terms of Sassy Tales was, I wrote fiction for the first time. So I have told a story about a cyber crime and then explained that this is not fiction, it is real, and here is the real case where it happened. And this is just a fictionalized tale. So the whole idea is, I will tell you what will happen if you do this. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not. And perchance you go ahead and do this and you fall victim, then here are your remedies. And then please avail of them. And it also explains how do you avail of it. So when I wrote this book and I chose a very catchy cover, my publishers were very upset because they said this is not typical for a lawyer's book. And I explained to them it's not meant to be only for lawyers. It helps lawyers, particularly youngsters who want to practice cybercrime. It gives them guidance that if it's a similar case they are dealing with, they'll know what sections to apply. They'll know what are the documents to put together before they go file the case. All the guidance they need is there. But it's also meant for every user. And today the users are getting younger and younger. So you have to start early, And often people ask me, how young do you start this pedagogy?
And kids have internet with them. They watch videos on YouTube.
Not just that. At what stage and at what age do you give a child your mobile phone? How do you know what they are looking at on that mobile phone? How do you know what the pop-ups are showing to them? Look at the kind of content that comes up sometimes when you're playing games, right? How are you going to protect them then? So my advice always is, when do you teach a child good touch, bad touch? That is the time to teach them also about good touch and bad touch on online domains.
So ma'am, is that you? On the cover?
Actually, in a way it is. So, I must thank my interns for this. They were so kind. I had actually done a hand drawing. Then they captured it and they asked me. So I said, yes, the rest of it is too cute to be me, but the crazy hair is kind of me. So, but I think they did more justice to me than I could have. And they helped me design the cover for this. Thank you.
I think I'm looking forward to read the book too. Now.
I look forward to your feedback.
I'm here with brainchild behind Cybersati, founder of Cybersati. What influenced or motivated you to bring Cybersati to life and shape it?
Actually, I thought about this idea in UK. I was there for the Chevening Fellowship. And as part of the fellowship, they had organized a meeting with NCA. As a practitioner, I'm aware of the kind of harms that ail online domains, particularly with respect to child sexual abuse material. But that meeting was an eye-opener in the context of how heinous it can be. So that night, I actually thought of the name and the concept, because as a criminal lawyer, I understand that a person in trouble does not reach out to parents or to authority figures. They reach out to a friend, right? And that's why the name Cybersati. And the other concept behind it is that I want everyone to become a peer mentor. So if you have some inputs from me today and you carry it forward and share it with 5 others, you have been a Cybersati. Right. So the whole idea was to make youngsters who are the masters of the domain. They know technology. They have to now understand the threats and vulnerabilities. So make them masters of or become aware of all these issues. Then they will be the mentors who will even train or teach the adults about the problems. That's how Cybersati was formulated.
Very thoughtful. And AIIMAS deals with alternate dispute resolution. So, as one of the first trained mediators in the country, how do you see mediation and alternate dispute resolution being effective mediums of justice delivery system in India?
We need it. To put it the first issue first. We have felt the need for many years, and I've been lucky to have been part of the evolutionary process, particularly in terms of mediation. And today, when I look back, I personally feel that the first thing that I gained out of having trained as a mediator was to become a better lawyer. To be able to lend further value to clients where I could convince them to settle, convince them to negotiate and close at a pre-litigation stage sometimes, or even pending litigations. And this is a process which is a very positive and proactive methodology. I feel that there is a lot of fear because of lack of awareness about what mediation really is about. You now have a law, the Mediation Act, that has come out of 2023, but yet there is still lack of awareness about it. The most important thing that every lawyer and every litigant needs to know is mediation does not force you into a settlement. It gives you the right to decide what is it that you're willing to settle for. Do you want to settle at all or not? And on what terms? That's the criticality of mediation. And arbitration is still adversarial, whereas mediation is totally owned by the litigants participating in the process. They own the solutions and they decide what the solution will be. I think once that fear goes out of their mind, that somehow they're being cornered into agreeing to something, which they don't really want, and they understand that litigating longer is really not going to help them further. I think that would help in the process a lot. And of course, the reason I mentioned about why India needs it certainly is, of course, the backlog issue. And we are a very litigious country. A simple statistic I saw recently was about how many cases the Supreme Court has disposed of. Right, substantial number of the backlog, but that many number of cases were filed afresh. So that's how litigious we are, and therefore this alternative in terms of mediation or a mediated settlement is a very critical inclusion.
Ma'am, could you shed light on the interplay of the new age technology like Gen AI and machine learning with the world of alternate dispute resolution?
Interesting. See, I have spoken a lot in terms of blockchain and ADR also. So, alternate dispute, I mean, in any field of law, I would just take a slight detour there and say, in any field of law now, AI plays a critical role. Be it in terms of improving processes, and now also in terms of contributing to the substantive part of law. For instance, to put it in simpler terms, earlier we used AI in case management. Now we are using AI, Gen AI as you mentioned it. You're using that to help you formulate the case you want to submit before court. So AI is here to stay too, and it is going to play a role in not just ADR but in any field of law. But it can have a critical role to play in terms of one, reducing the backlog and helping in terms of the court litigation, and also streamline ADR. How? One, I told you that we used to use AI for process driven work, right? So today, in terms of not just case management, but evaluating what is the backlog about, how do what are the solutions that have worked elsewhere, what can we apply here, how do we apply it here? So that kind of an initiative, if it were to be started, I'm sure it's already started, but it's still work in progress. If something to that effect is done and use of technology, so this is something I started way back in 2004. So my pet project at that time was not just technology and law, but technology in law and how it can help in terms of streamlining processes. So once we study the terrain, we'll be able to decide further how quickly and how smoothly we can bring the system back into shape. Right? Similarly, in terms of preparatory process, understand, and we now know from the Mata case from the US that nothing can substitute the human intervention. So a lawyer can use Gen AI for a preparatory process. Why not? The technology is there for your benefit. But don't use it as a crutch. Don't think that's the only work that you're expected to do. You still have to apply your expertise and check firstly, whether what is being generated is real and not just hallucination. Secondly, what is being generated is relevant for your case, and what more can you look for? So you can't substitute hard work with technology.
Now moving on to my favorite question. In your TEDx Warsaw Women, you spoke about becoming fearless. For many young professionals in this field, fear is natural. Invisibility cloak, which you referred, is comfortable guard than seizing the opportunity of being visible. How to handle this fear or mitigate fear when it overwhelms us professionally and even personally?
Absolutely. Very difficult question again. See, as I have mentioned in my TEDx talk, and thank you for watching that, whatever I've shared there is real. Many people who see me today think that I have just said something because it's a TEDx talk, but that's not so. That was who I was. And I have said one line there, if I recall correctly. I've talked about how when one realization happened that it was because of fear. Fear can drive you to say lies. Fear can drive you to do something wrong, which you wouldn't dream of doing otherwise. So that one line which I use there is that it's not a one-way street. It's not like you overcome fear and then you become totally fearless. That's not how life works. At every stage, every initiative you start, every step you take, that fear is likely to be there. So will keep coming back like waves. So how you meet it every single time is what counts. And on that, my only word of advice there would be that respect fear.
Okay.
And I always tell people, be afraid but don't be fearful. The difference I say is, if I'm preparing for a case, even today, I would be afraid if I don't prepare. I would be afraid if I don't do my homework, right? I still do my work. So you don't replace casualness and don't mistake it for fearlessness. Be afraid enough that you will do your work right. But don't let it become fear which is going to stifle you or stop you from doing what you want to do without even trying it. That courage. Okay, I'll give it a try and let's see what happens. And I mentioned this early in the interview. I'll close out here with that I have started my career 3 times over, and I would say technically this is my 4th innings. Because as a senior advocate, you start afresh. Everything that you have done till now has to be set aside, and you have a very different kind of process involved, right? So every time, and I talked to you about the constructive destruction part too. So every time I have destroyed what I have done, I have not done it thinking this is it. I don't want to do it anymore. I've done it because I wanted to build something new there. And I was courageous enough to take that step. And I really thank everyone who has been part of the journey with me, who probably lent courage to my, conviction. And I move forward. So that's something you have to believe in and be prepared for failures. I have faced many. It's not like I haven't faced failures. It's just that when a failure comes in your path, treat it as a challenge and move forward.
So this is a very honest approach to fear, that fear will reoccur and you have to always face it. So it's also very comforting to know that you'll never be fearless. There will never be a day when you would be afraid of anything, but you still have to move on and accept failure and be okay. For our last segment, any advice you would like to offer or share from your illustrious and phenomenal years in this field to our young professionals?
I think I've shared a lot already. I would just close out by saying all the best to all of you, because this is your time, So seize the opportunity and do well, but do it with a conscience, do it with conviction, and do it. I talk about integrity and honesty. We always assume integrity and honesty to be something to do with financial honesty, but that's not just it. Honesty is also about the integrity you show in terms of how you do your work and the comprehensiveness with which you do it. So that's critical, and that is something we can never relax at any stage of our profession, because at every stage we may grow and we may have become bigger, we may be handling larger cases, etc. But that impact to the client remains the same. What I told you earlier, that it impacts another person's life, that remains the same. So we cannot get lax, we cannot get casual. So that integrity and honesty to work, to your peers, to your seniors, to your office, own all of it and show that integrity. And I can definitely say success follows.
This has been a fantastic experience, and we do not want the interview to end. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and being here with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.